Prometheus stood atop the table carved from rock. The bodies of those he'd vanquished lay strewn on the floor below him. None looked like the beast in front of him, though. Perhaps no human who'd ever existed looked like Hector de Gracilis, though Prometheus didn't care. The room shook, as if the gods themselves ran across the ground above. Prometheus still held control over much of the planet, his awesome mind waging war against the Commonwealth's fleet. He didn't yet know if help was coming, but as he stared at Gracilis, he cared little about that either. At that moment, standing before a man almost twice his size, Prometheus only cared about killing. He would slay the one who had married his wife. Gracilis's dual sabers were in his hands, lasers protruding from both ends. Pro saw that at least the bottom halves were capable of moving, though the top seemed to remain rigid. Prometheus wore his mech suit with the helmet retracted. He wanted the man he was about to kill to see his face. Pro's whip hung at his side. Then he started swirling it, first around his right shoulder, then his left. The lasers whirled at such a fast pace, the hum of air could be heard despite the room's rumbling. He took 2 fast steps, crossing the distance between them faster than most humans could detect with their eyes. He swung low, going for the big man's knees. Gracilis met Pro's whip with his left saber, stopping it while the right slashed at his head. Prometheus barely avoided the swing, his hair singeing as he ducked toward the stone table. He swept his left leg and hit Gracilis. The monster didn't flinch as the metal mech suit smashed into his shin. Pro saw the saber swinging toward his chest milliseconds before contact and shoved himself backward with his right leg. The saber burned through the top layer of metal on his chest, but went no deeper as he skidded across the rock table. Gracilis leaped toward him, both sabers at the ready. Pro came to a stop and rolled, barely missing the beast's armored knee. Gracilis hit the rock table, and the right edge broke off. Dust filtered into the air. Pro came to his feet, but the beast was moving as well. Given his size, he shouldn't have been able to move that fast, yet he was almost on top of Prometheus again. Gracilis's sabers collided with the red whip as both slashed forward, trying to gain ground. Prometheus found himself giving way, unable to keep up with the beast's dual-bladed speed. The room was shaking harder, and dust was falling from the ceiling. He could stop the attack on the fleet or fight harder here, but then his followers would be doomed. He had to do both. Pro was getting closer to a corner, and at this point he was just doing everything in his power to keep the sabers from taking off a limb. He saw the light blue titan in his peripheral vision. She remained against the wall, her whip in her hand with the lasers furled. Pro would have no chance if she entered the battle. He felt the corner coming up quickly. If he ended up there, he was dead. Just before reaching it, Prometheus spun, his feet like a dancer's and his whip a blaze of light. It was the first time he'd moved faster than the monster, and he found himself out of the corner with Gracilis backed into it. Nothing fazed the creature, though. Just because his body had been outmaneuvered didn't mean his mind had. His face showed no shock, and his massive leg rose into the air. He kicked with a speed that defied physics. Pro could do nothing to stop it. He rose into the air. His suit had taken the brunt of the attack, but his mind knew what was coming from behind. His helmet started rolling out and had barely covered the back of his skull when he hit the rock wall. Pieces broke and crumbled, and dust sprang up around his frame. Behind him was an imprint of his body. Pro's whip dropped slightly, but not out of his hand. His helmet finished wrapping around his skull as he looked up. The beast was charging him, sabers ready to finish the job. Prometheus had perhaps not even a second before he'd be impaled. He dropped, and using the wall as his brace, launched forward. He hit Gracilis's legs with his left shoulder, unable to maneuver his whip to cut the man. The beast rose into the air, and Prometheus continued flying in the opposite direction. Using his left hand, Pro touched the ground and flipped back up on his feet.